Hello, football fans, and welcome to Part A, the home leg of our chat with former Socceroo and Sydney FC legend Alex Brosque. If you haven't already listened to our new segment that we released last week, which was the warm-up, which is a bit of a light-hearted look into getting to know Alex Brosque, please make sure you check it out on YouTube or Spotify. And while you're there, make sure you subscribe to our channels as well. Please make sure you're following us on Instagram and sharing and commenting on all of our content, as that helps us here at the Corner Flag do what we are doing. So we're about to pick up with our chat with Alex. We're going back to the very start. So we're going to discuss straight away his earliest memories of football and then go through some of his early achievements, international tournaments, and obviously coming to the A-League and some moves abroad before we wrap this episode up. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy our Part A, the home leg chat with Alex Brosque. All right, now we're going to dive into your career now. So I'd love to go back to your earliest memories of football. What do you remember first? What sticks out?
As a kid, a few things. I remember sort of playing park football for a local. My earliest memories of playing for a local South American team called Fairfield Athletics at the time. They were a Uruguayan club, and playing with a lot of guys that you would know, that we're still close family friends with. My brother-in-law for one, and a couple other friends that I still see and still quite close with. So they, I loved football, but for me, and it's funny, it's something that I sort of maintained for the rest of my career. I was always at my best when I had a good group of players around me, and that change of environment was good. And that started from a real early age. This Uruguayan, side that we had off the field, our families were close friends. We used to, after games, we'd go and have lunches and dinners together. We're at all each other's parties, and we'd see each other every weekend. It was such a special group of people. End of the year, we'd go to nationals and state titles and all those things. We'd have trips to Wollongong and Canberra together. An incredible footballing childhood that I had. I always remember those memories, and like I said, the fact that I still know a lot of them and still close with a lot of them is quite special. But that's my earliest memories.
Yep, and obviously still being close to this, but probably a testament to the kind of person you are as well. Very humble, very, very much family focused and friend. That those people become family. And I know what the Uruguayan culture is like. You might not be related with blood, but you guys are family.
Yeah.
If you're taking holidays together, you're doing everything, and it's a wonderful culture to be a part of. So, how did you progress from that park football into rep footy? What was that sort of pathway for you at the time?
It was one where, look, for me, I was happy to sort of just keep playing. I didn't have any real, as a young kid, desire or ambition to, I want to. We all watched the Premier League and Serie A back in those days and think, that'd be great to play there. Mm-hmm. But it was always just a dream and nothing where I was focused on, right, I need to be here, I want to play there and need to make it and all of that. I just love playing the game, love playing with my friends. But I remember one year where my brother-in-law, who was my best mate in that team, he went and trialled for a rep team at the time, and he made it and he wanted me to go. And my parents were like, no, you're staying at this club, we're going to stay here, which I wasn't happy about at the time. I wanted to follow my mate, but I stayed. And then the following year, I think there was that, my parents realised, okay, well, if he's, he probably should take that next step now and get into rep football. So it was that, I think in under 11s, I trialled for a couple clubs and didn't make it. So I stayed where I was. In under 12s, I then went and trialled for Southern Districts, who were like the sister club of Marconi back in those days. So Marconi and Sydney United, Southern Districts used to have trials together. So you sort of went in the one trial and then either one coach or the other picked you, or you didn't make it at all. So I got picked for Southern Districts. And then played there under 12s through to under 16s. And then from there, again, it just sort of... So it was one of those where it just naturally progressed, There was no real moment. Where, to be fair, I think under 16s, I had a really good year. up until that stage, I was always the smallest kid. I wasn't overly quick or big. I was definitely one of the smaller ones in all my teams. So it wasn't until 16 where I sort of stretched out and got a bit of pace that things really started to kick off. But even still, it was just a natural sort of progression. I went from under 16s into the Colts at Marconi and played a year there, and then went to the AIS, got selected. So it was sort of just a natural, slow progression.
Yes, and I do want to chat about the AIS in a minute, because it's a pathway that's not there now. But before we do, you went to Westfields High School, correct?
Yes.
Can you just run us through quickly who did you go through with? Like, who was in your? I know you spoke with David Carney at school, but it's always interesting to find out what footballers who went on to make it sort of school together. And for a spectator on the outside, it's weird going, because so many guys from Westfields do go on, because it's such a great program. You're playing against guys that you went to high school with, sort of at the highest level, or in the Socceroos or whatever. So was anyone in your sort of age group, or up one, down one, that you played with there who went on to have a good career? Anyone that would know?
Well, I mean, Carney would, I'd say, be the biggest. And again, one of those where we sort of, as we were the two of the older ones in our grade, so we became close friends pretty quickly. And yeah, I mean, still good mates with him to this day. We're now in business together outside of football, and he'd probably be the biggest, I'd say, in our age group. I can't remember, and again, this might just be my terrible memory, but anyone else in that age group or in that grade, in the one above, some very good players, both above, below. There was always, our Bill Turner Cup teams, Commonwealth Cup teams were always so strong, and some very, very good players. But I think while there may have been definitely some better players from our age group, I think it sort of highlights how fortunate you need to be to sort of go on and have a career. Because me and Carney, in terms of our age group, that 1983 age group, we were never really, one of the best two coming through. There were always, being left-sided players miles ahead of where we were growing up. But then, you get a bit of luck here and there. You again, like I said, you start to peak physically and develop things and work on your game, and you get a break here and there, and the right coach that likes you and gives you a chance, and things sort of naturally just go from there. But in our age groups, I think we were probably the only two. I hope I haven't forgotten anyone, but that's all I can remember.
Yeah, lovely. So back onto the AIS. How did that work? How did you go to be? You said you were selected. How does that work? Is someone tapping you on the shoulder? Is it a phone call? Is it because they've seen you at the Colts at Marconi, or what was the process around that? Because I've listened to a few other people talk about their time at the AIS, and they said they had everything at their fingertips. They said they probably underutilized what was there because they were so young and probably didn't. Now you look at the sports science behind everything, and they were probably doing that or close to a while ago, ahead of their time maybe. But how does it go being selected, like, to go there? And then what's it like when you're moving down there, staying in dorms? What's sort of set up like?
So I had a really good year in that National Youth League, playing with the Colts. So you had the Colts and the youth teams playing in the same competition. So the Colts were generally, 17, 18-year-olds, whereas the youth teams from each NSL club were a bit older. So the fact that we're playing with those older players, first graders were always dropping down, and I had a good year. It sort of came off the back of that, because mostly the AIS was selected from guys who were playing for their state teams, Queensland, New South Wales, Victorian state teams. So there were always, most of those players were identified from those camps and competitions. But I guess there's always one that sort of comes through in a different way, which I was playing at Marconi Colts and did well there. And I can't remember exactly whether it was, back in those days, a letter or a phone call that came. But yeah, I do remember getting asked to go down and trial for a week. And the AIS itself, in terms of where you live, my room would have been smaller than this studio that we're in at the moment. It was a tiny room, and I went in there. There's a bed, a wardrobe, and that's it, and a window, right? Which has things on it so you can't escape. It almost felt like a bit of a prison, right? Yeah. So I just remember going there, and me being incredibly close to my family. I just remember it was a tough week. I remember enjoying it, and I always hated trials. I hated going somewhere where I wasn't comfortable. So that week was difficult from that point of view. Missing home as well. I just thought, man, I don't know if I could do it. And it's only Canberra, right? It's 2 hours from Sydney, so how tough it must be for the rest of the boys. But I just thought, I don't know if I can. If I make it, whatever. But I did get selected, so I got a letter saying that I'd been selected and offered a scholarship to go there. So look, in the end, I realised that it was something through speaking, one with my parents, but also a couple other people, that it was the right thing to do. If I really wanted to progress and as a footballer, then going down to the AIS would make me a better player, and it definitely did. I mean, you go there and my room changed a little bit. I was able to throw a TV in there and get a little desk, so it made it a bit prettier. But just living in that environment of being with a group of boys, you're all there for the same reason, same purpose. You have fun together. You laugh, you cry together, you have difficult moments, good moments, and just what you're able to share in that year or two that you're there is one-sided. Then you got the football, which is just, it's incredible. It is incredible. They focus and try and get you to make sure you keep your schooling and doing all that. We had study halls where we do every night or a couple times a week, I think it was, to make sure you're on top of your education. But it just was a complete focus on football. We're training every day, sometimes, 2 to 3 times a day if you had individual sessions. So the way they helped, we'd have strikers just doing their own little bit, midfielders, defenders, goalkeepers, as well as your afternoon trainings. You had gym sessions a couple of times a week. And in terms of underutilising, clearly the gym is where I underutilised. I look back now and think, man, I had the gym there to me, like available to me every day. I should have just gone and become a beast. That's one regret for me that I didn't. And look, it would have changed me as a player. I guess I wouldn't have been the same. But I regret it now because it's hard getting myself over to the gym now that I've retired. I just don't have that motivation. But back then, incredible facility, and just prepared you. Look, there's no surprise that so many players that came out of the AIS went on to have good careers. I just feel like at that age, when you're a young kid and you're needing to understand what it takes to either go and play in Europe and be exposed to playing every single day and training twice a day, the AIS fully prepared you for that, and it was a great experience.
Yeah, and a lot of people that I talk to or hear from, the gap from in Australian football at 13, 14 to overseas is not that large. Well, it might be shifting now, I'm not sure, but in the past it's not that large. It was that next step from 15 to sort of 18 where, I suppose maybe the training and facilities you had at AIS is what is a norm overseas.
For a lot earlier, exactly right.
Yeah, so that could be a reason as well. So it's a shame that program's not running now. The onus probably more on the clubs to have their youth systems and youth setups, I suppose. But was there anyone that you went through at the AIS with, any other players there that stand out that you remember?
Look, there's a couple that I sort of shared journeys with from there. Carl Valeri's one. We went through the AIS. He was a Canberra boy, so he lived locally. He didn't stay in there with us, but he went on. I remember he signed for, I think, Inter Milan from the AIS, and it was huge. There were a couple boys, a good mate of mine, John T. Richter, who played in the A-League for a number of years, was another one I was really close with. And who else from that year? Matty Mackay as well. Matty Mackay was a strange bloke.
Was his shirt tucked in like at bedtime as well?
But he was a guy, he lived right at the top of our building, and I'm sure there was a sign at the front of his steps. No one went into his room. No one knew where he was. We'd be there as a group at the shopping centre, and then Matty Mackay would be there with his bags of groceries, doing his own thing. He was an odd character, great bloke, but just stuck to himself. As one of those guys, which was weird. He was from Queensland. There were a couple of Queensland boys there, but who else? That's probably it. Yeah. I'd say that. Yeah.
And from the research I did, Lee Sterry recalled you from, is that correct?
Yes.
Is that before or after the youth? Was that before the Youth World Cup?
Before the World Cup, yes.
So when he recalls you, does that mean you're done because you're signing a Is it a pro deal?
Yeah.
Yeah, like how can he just go, get out? Like,
Well, because I'd gone to the AIs from Marconi, that connection was there. And Lee Sterry came into the club. Marconi had always been a real prestigious club that spent a lot of money and brought foreigners in. They were going through a period where, Lee Sterry was brought in and was told, listen, the budget's been slashed. You've got to bring through youngsters. So, he had a lot of players that he brought up through the youth team. And I think what was normal back then as well was a lot of the NSL clubs would look at the AIS for players there to try and bring back. And because I had that connection with Marconi Lee, he called me up and told me to come back and told me what he was doing, the fact that he was going to be giving a lot of youngsters a chance. And I remember having the discussion with Steve O'Connor, who was my AIS coach at the time, and he said, he tried to convince me to not go. He said, look, mate, I see it every year. A lot of coaches from NSL clubs, they promise kids the world and then they go back there and they don't play them. They end up wasting a year or two. You're better off staying here, developing, becoming a better player and then going, So I was torn whether I should stay or go, but I just remember, looking at the squad that Marconi had and just thinking at that time that there was an opportunity for me, to crack into that squad. And when I look back, there were a lot of players that left the AIS, went to, say, Northern Spirit, and that happened to them, right? They were promised they were going to get game time and they didn't, and there were a lot of experienced players there that were playing ahead of them. They didn't really get a chance, and it was difficult for them. So that's, again, where that luck comes in. I was approached as well by Perth Glory to go and play there, but at the time they had, Damien Morey, Bobby Despotovsky, and I just thought, Nick Merger was there. There's no way I'm going to get any game time, so I had to sort of think about that side of it. So look, I took that chance and, remember the conversation with Steve O'Connor up in his office and just said, look, I appreciate and understand what you're saying, but I think this is a good opportunity for me. I want to go back and play with Marconi. And he stood up, shook my hand. He said, mate, once an AIS boy, always an AIS boy. He said, so enjoy, good luck, and no doubt we'll be in touch over your journey. Thanks for coming. And I thanked him because it was a changing experience for me being at the AIS, everything that it did for me as a player and everything he did for me, in terms of understanding my weaknesses, what I needed to work on to improve, and then how to sort of carry that on into the future. So it ended up being a good decision. I went back to Marconi and played a lot of football in that first year, and again, things progressed from there.
And how was the NSL experience? Obviously, it's not running anymore, but massive cultural environment in that sense. And obviously, Marconi had great roles with Sydney United down the road and things like that. So any memories from that really stand out? Obviously, you were a Young Footballer of the Year, I think 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
Anything that really stands out from that time?
Look, I think just being able to play for my childhood club. I grew up in Bosley Park, just down the road from Marconi. As a youngster, and once I was old enough, even in those early years from my house, I used to be able to walk a straight line to Marconi, only 2 minutes down the road. And somehow I was still late to training sometimes. The boys used to laugh about that, but yeah. It was my childhood club. So to get to, and the NSL I grew up watching, I remember going to watch Marconi, standing behind the goal and the flares and the passion. You speak about the cultural backings that those clubs had, and they made the atmosphere at those games, and they were incredible to be a part of and watch. And I remember some incredible moments from the NSL and just thinking, I'd love to be a part of it. I sat on the other side of the fence and used to watch those players and had idols of mine growing up. And just remember thinking, the first couple of times that I walked out on that stadium, how iconic it was to me, that ground, and to be able to do it now. And the NSL had been slowly, dying by that point, which is why it came to an end and the A-League came in. But even still, getting able to play for a team that I grew up watching was special for me. So I do have some great moments. The Marconi teams that I played with we had some great boys in those change rooms, and I learned a lot as well. It was a different type of football. I think that old school generation, how tough it was coming through when you had guys that, were trying to break you in every single session, but in the right way, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't. It was never with bad intent. It was always to toughen you up and make you stronger, and understand that if you got hit as a young kid, you didn't speak back. You got up and you kept working, and you earned your respect off those older players.
Yeah.
And it was that tough during the week that, if you survived to Saturday, it was you were ready for it. You were ready to come up against some of these monsters that were out there to genuinely try and probably hurt you. But you knew as well that everything you'd been through the week with these guys, of them trying to, toughen you up and break you down, that come the weekend, they were all standing there behind you. So if you went, in a tackle, or someone was trying to intimidate you from the other team, these guys were there behind you. And I just loved that culture and how good it was coming through. So I feel very fortunate to have come through the NSL to then go into the A-League.
Yeah. And I actually remember I signed a Marconi in the under-15s, and that would have probably been your second season there, around there.
Yep.
And I remember you go into the car park, and, guys like you, and I remember this is before I knew you, yourself and Nick Carl would come and say hello to the boys, and you guys are just so nice. And for us, we'd be training on the backfield, and I remember the coach constantly, like, if you guys were training on the main pitch, he'd tell us, stop staring at the lights. Like, if you're not there yet, like, you want to get there, you need to be here. There was that clear pathway into just from being a 15-year-old or even younger kid, and you could see those guys rolling into training or whatever, or we'd stick around if you had a midweek game, or we'd go and watch after training or whatever. That pathway was just really, really clear and easy to see. And I remember calling with the boys how nice, like, guys like you and Nick were, just to say hello to us and ask how we were doing when you didn't know who we were or anything like that. So little things like that really stick out, for myself as a kid, that you remember now. And I suppose we've lost that little bit of transition there, and then the NSL ended, and I remember, like, the lights were off, and we started being allowed on the stadium, because we were never allowed on the stadium. It was just first grade, that was it. And then there was no NSL, and there was this real, like, moment of limbo, where people didn't know what was happening. And then Marconi were rumoured to be getting a gig there, and I actually remember because there was a big period, wasn't there, where there was no footy, and I remember I was training and they asked me to go and play. First grade, we played with 20s, and they did an extra player. So I went and played. And me and another boy in the team went up there, and Simon Colosimo was there. So he was obviously going to sign if they got the... And we're introducing ourselves to everyone. And I'm Simo, and I go, that's Simon Colosimo. And he introduced himself as, like, it was like Craig. It was some random thing. I look at my mate and I go, that's Simon Colosimo, isn't it? He goes, I'm pretty sure that's Simon Colosimo. We're playing the game and everyone's calling out for him. Simo, to the whatever guy. It's Simon Colosimo. Like, he's obviously not allowed to be here. I don't know if he was under contract or what was going on, but I remember that was such a strange little thing. But yeah, you'd obviously gone, and from there, Youth World Cup, was that during your time at Marconi?
That was, yes. It was during my time at Marconi.
Can you talk me quickly through that experience? Where was it? Who'd you come up against? Memories?
It was in the UAE. I guess back in the time before, now we all know Dubai and Abu Dhabi and how big those cities are, but back then it was, I didn't know where I was going. I guess some small country in the Middle East to play in a World Cup. I knew it was going to be hot there. That's all I'd heard, and but I was excited. First time wearing the green and gold in a tournament, even though it was for the younger grades, it was still very special. And we had players in that time like Scotty McDonald who were playing overseas, a couple of boys that were playing overseas already and coming back. So again, first taste of international football, and I can't remember the group stage. So Ange Postecoglou was our coach, and I remember so we qualified, we did all of that, and we finally got there. First game, I think we drew the first game. It wasn't a great start, and we've gone in to do the video after that first game, and Ange, so we're in a room, the whole team, it's we're doing our video on how the game went, and Ange just sort of stood in front of the TV and he said, right, Brosque, just watch yourself here for the first 2 minutes, mate. So the whole team's watching. I've been called out. I'm thinking, shit, what have I done? Anyway, he goes, mate, all right, that's you right there, right? And I haven't really moved. The ball was being played around. I haven't really done, not that I was being lazy, but I guess in a way I was just, he goes, mate, we're 2 minutes into a World Cup. You haven't moved from that circle. He goes, and he sort of blasted me after that, and it sort of woke me up, and I thought, shit, So I don't know if it was one of those of just being overawed by the situation or whatever, but I remember getting called out, getting a bit of a kick up the backside for that, and then ended up going on to have a pretty good tournament. But we played Brazil in our group stage and had an incredible game as a team in that one. We played a great game. We're up 3-0, sorry. I think just after half time, and it just felt like, man, this is Brazil, right? I mean, you grew up watching Brazil, and I know it's under 20s, but it's still Brazil.
Yep.
So we're up 3-0 against a team that's supposed to go on and win it. This is crazy. And then it just seemed like they flicked a switch from about the 70th minute, and we were just under the pump. And their quality, I think Dani Alves was in that team. I don't know who else. There were a couple of boys, but no big superstars. Definitely not at that point anyway. But they flicked the switch. They ended up coming back to 3-2, and we hung on, right? So we won. We topped our group, and there was just this feel about it that, you know, these guys are supposed to win, and we've just beat them. We can go on and win this. And then we played the hosts, the UAE, in the next round, and just don't know what happened, to be honest. I remember it was a difficult match. They weren't overly great. They frustrated us, and I think in the way that we played, I just remember it being a difficult game, and they just got a counter-attack right at the end and scored a scrappy goal, and we were knocked out, and just like that. So it was difficult to take, but an awesome experience. I remember, like I said, the group, a lot of those boys I'd come through the AIS with as well, so it was great to be reunited with them in that environment, playing in a World Cup, and it was awesome.
And just on Ange, could you tell then, like, was he exceptional? Was he one like Graham Arter, who obviously has just improved as he's gone? Or was there something about him at that time?
I can't remember much of our sessions, to be honest. I do feel like he's one that has, which is normal, right? He's been doing the game. I mean, people ask him now, and it's funny watching his interviews, right, where someone says, "Oh, you're a new manager," and he's like, "I've been doing this for 20, 30 years. You know, I haven't just rocked up here and all of a sudden I'm here at Celtic and at Tottenham. I've been doing this for a number of years." So I do feel like there's nothing that stood out in terms of his sessions and how, you know, he approached, say, the video things or anything like that. Nothing really that stood out. But just as a guy, I remember what he was like as a coach. He had this, there was something about him. When he walked into a room, you were terrified of him, but in a good way. You know, he had that respect that he commanded from the players. When he spoke, you listened. His message was always clear and simple and to the point. So he had that about him definitely as a manager. And yeah, I mean, to say he was going to go on and do what he was going to do, it was impossible to tell back then. But I do remember, loving working under him and seeing sort of his progression into the A-League and what he's now gone on to do.
So move into 2004, big year for you personally. Dutch Giants Feyenoord come knocking, and the Olympics. So can you walk me through, I suppose, 2004 for you and how that sort of changed your life?
Yes, off the back of the Under-20s World Cup, like I said, I remember, we had a good tournament as a country, beating the eventual champions in Brazil and playing some good games. I personally as well had a decent, tournament, and off the back of that was the Olympic team. It just sort of rolled straight in. So a lot of the players from the Under-20s went into that Olympic team squad, but yeah, I remember getting a phone call from my agent at the time saying that an offer or that Feyenoord were interested, and an offer was sort of there. But, because of the way things were with foreign players, especially at my age, I think there was a minimum wage. And look, unless you're an exceptional talent, which a lot of players that go there would be, what they did was they would loan players out to smaller European countries, because I think the minimum wage for a foreigner, I think 20 years and above in Holland was 400,000 euros. So from a kid coming from Marconi Stallions, they're not going to pay that much money, right? So the idea was they were happy with how I went in that World Cup, enough to sign me, but to loan me out to a club in Belgium. So my trial, I went to train with Westerlo straight away. So I trialled, I played a couple games with their youth team, and they were happy. So that signing through Feyenoord, onto Westerlo, all happened. Yeah, I mean, I went to the Olympics before then, so the plan was to go and play in the Olympics and then go off to Belgium straight from there. And the Olympics, look, it was an incredible experience being a part of it, but I do look back at that and just think that we could have done more as a squad, personally as well. We ended up losing, similar to the under-20s. We had a good group stage. Argentina was in our group and we lost 1-0 to they were the eventual champions and had an incredible squad. But we did well enough, progressed out of the group, and then lost to Iraq in a disappointing match. I remember I had a good chance in that game, chipped the goalkeeper, thought it was going in, and somehow the keepers managed to scramble back and save it. And, we missed a rebound and ended up losing 1-0. But you do look back and think, if that had a bit more pace about it, it rolls in, it's 1-0, it gets us going, and we go on and win the game, what could have been? The next game, we're all of a sudden, fighting potentially for a medal, which would have been incredible. But it wasn't to be, and ended up going from that Olympics experience onto Westerlo in Belgium, and another just incredible journey or part of the journey and moment, and one of those where I sort of look back and think what could have been if things had been different. I got an injury in my first match, the goalkeeper landed, it was a corner, goalkeeper landed on my ankle, and I was tore ligaments, was out for about a month. And it's difficult as a young kid. I remember the manager had a few talks, even when I was going to make my debut, about, this isn't Australia anymore, this is Europe. So there was this idea that Australia and our league here wasn't that good, right? So, all of a sudden you're coming to a big place. So the coach and the people there sort of look down on Australians and the Australian league. So going there with the way they thought of us, getting injured straight away, you're in the treatment room for the first month, and just seeing the players walk past the physio all the time. It was tough, So to then go out and have to do your rehab on your own, and it was difficult. But one of those moments that you sort of learn from, as you're doing those laps around the field, it drives that hunger to, right, I want to make something of this. And look, I played about 17 games in that season, but not in the position that I felt was better suited to me. I'd always played as a striker, and I was played more as a left midfielder, which I was never comfortable in that position. I'm not a natural winger who's going to, run and beat people. That was never my game. So I felt that the coach really didn't sort of give me that chance. The back end of the season, he let me play a couple of games up front where I felt I did quite well. But it was just a difficult year for me, where at the end of the season, the opportunity was there to, the A-League was gathering momentum and was about to start, and there was this whole buzz around that here, and look, all the advice I was being given was, look, Australia, you've sort of left that behind. You need to go, and if you want to go and play at a big club in Europe, you need to stay here. You can't go back to Australia. But staying at Westerlo wasn't really a good idea either, because I felt if I stayed there, the coach really wasn't going to get more out of me, or I wasn't going to progress there. So the idea was, okay, well, I mean, Feyenoord have signed me, let them find a new club for me. And look, in the end, while that was happening, I just made that decision. Look, I want to come home. Like I said, I was always close with my family. Missed home that year was incredibly difficult from that side of things, missing home. But one of those things where, as a player now, looking back, that journey just wasn't for me. Being over there, and I look back at all the players that have sort of, the guys that stuck it out and really made it to the top level, that golden generation we had, the boys that we're seeing go through now that have, gone to your smaller clubs in Europe and are slowly progressing. It's a tough grind, and it's incredibly, you need to be incredibly strong mentally, so everyone looks at the physical and technical side of our game and how, what you need to make it as a pro, but the mental strength of being away, getting injured, being out of form, yep. The coach not picking you, being away from home and living on your own and having to do everything for yourself, in a place where you're not really respected as an Australian player. And that takes so much to come through. And I didn't have that, right? So that's a part of my game that I didn't have to be able to stick it out and forge a career in Europe. I was always comfortable in that comfort zone of being amongst friends, being with family. So for me to get the best out of myself, I knew I had to come home, and I did, and came back to the A-League and then played most of my career here.
You just answered so many of my questions. All right. I was going to ask you about the challenges in, obviously, Belgium, injury and language and communication, all those things. Like, thank you so much. Like, you just pretty much nailed all of that. But I would like to circle back quickly just to the Olympics, because you're the first Olympian I've ever had on. Did you guys stay in the village, the Olympic Village?
We did. Not at the beginning. We didn't go to the opening ceremony either, because the football had started by then. And look, that whole experience for me was a bit of a blur. I remember we did get to spend some time in the village, and we saw, that in itself was insane. I mean, there's a food hall where all the athletes would just go and eat, and you had all different countries and what they ate represented at different stalls, and you could go and try different things. The food is free, so you'd sort of go there any time during the day, and you've got athletes who are doing their thing and preparing for their events, and it was incredible. It was an incredible experience. They had a McDonald's that was free in the village, right? So, I mean, I think I was...
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I was just getting cheeseburgers for fun. You didn't have to pay for it. It was, I was probably the only guy in line. Everyone's making sure they're eating healthy and the right things. I'm there getting cheeseburgers and McChickens before a game, which wasn't good, but an incredible experience. Just seeing athletes that are there. I mean, the Olympics for most athletes in every other sport, that's the pinnacle, and ours is the World Cup. But for every other sport, and just seeing athletes in their environment and just circling and mingling with each other was unreal. But yeah, so we only spent a short time in the village. Otherwise, we were playing at whatever location the games were held, and we spent some time at some nice islands in Greece, and it was a good experience.
Yeah, and just on that, you said there's world-class athletes. Is anyone? Did you mingle with them? Did you speak to anybody or?
Not really. I remember, just the guys. I remember seeing, I think Ian Thorpe, Grant Hackett, walking together towards the meals area and just saying a quick hi, and they were like, "Hey boys," and just that's probably the only thing that stuck out for me, seeing those guys. I didn't know too much about anyone else big in any other sport, but again, you could just feel like you were surrounded by great people everywhere walking through that place. Yeah,
and I had to look through some of the team lists, especially obviously the group that you were in, and I was going to read out some of these names from the Argentinian team. So that Willy Caballero in goals, obviously when I was playing the Premier League. One of the overage players was Ayala. They had Mascherano, Colaccini, Heinze wasn't overage, Saviola, Tevez, Kili Gonzalez was an overage, Andreas D'Alessandro. And I'm still leaving players out. At that time, did you know that those guys, were they, were they, I suppose, you knew they were going to go kick on and have great careers or already having careers? Or was it sort of, because it is an under-23s tournament, was a lot of them sort of at that younger age where you didn't really know, now with social media and everything, everyone knows everybody, but different time back then. So were you guys very well aware of, how good Carlos Tevez was before playing that game, how good Saviola was, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, so those guys, Mascherano as well, we knew, I don't know where they were in their careers at that moment, but we definitely knew that this Argentina team was stacked. Heinze, we knew he was at Manchester United at the time and a big signing. So I don't know, I can't remember where they were playing, but we definitely knew of those players and how big they were. They went on to do a lot more from there. But already, Ronaldo was another one, Cristiano Ronaldo, who was there playing for Portugal at the time. And again, don't know where he was, whether he'd already signed for Man United, but we knew who he was and how big he was. And
was he at Backers getting cheeseburgers?
He definitely, you've seen his body. He definitely wasn't at McDonald's. He was... we stayed, like I said, at this island, at this resort, and I remember going out onto our balcony and seeing him on his balcony, and he was just taken in the sun, just chilling. I mean, they didn't get out of their group. I don't know who else was in their team, but he was there enjoying the sun and probably not really wanting to be there, I guess, given where he was at that point of his career. But seeing someone like him as well and what he's gone on to do, incredible.
Yeah. And I'll skip forward now because, like I said, you answer a bunch of my questions. With Westerlo, you went with Nadia, your partner at the time. How was that conversation? You know, you're 20, 19, 20 years old. You're going to move halfway around the world together. How'd that go with her parents, with your parents? Like, what was the situation around that?
Look, I think for a lot of the players' wives who saw my wife go over, at the time we were boyfriend and girlfriend, so we weren't married yet and we were 20 years old. So the players and their the partners would all get together before or during the game, and they'd sit together. And a lot of them were, a lot of the guys that I played with experienced, Belgian players, and they're looking at this young 20-year-old girl who's come the other side of the world with her boyfriend, and they were freaking out. They're like, "So you just left home with him? You've been together for what, a year?" And just couldn't get their heads around it. But for her and for me, it just sort of seemed normal. Look, to be fair, we grew up together, right? So her brother was one that, back in that, Uruguayan side that I played in from under sixes, I played with. So I played with her brother. We were close family friends since we were kids. So we knew each other very, very well. So even when we did get together eventually at 19, I think, I knew her parents, like my parents and vice versa. So we were already very close. So the fact that we went away together, it was difficult, but it felt natural. It felt like, look, I want you to be there. She wanted to come with me, so it felt natural. I remember the conversation with my parents, with her parents, and they were all great. They understood that as a footballer, this was the next step in my career. That at that point, the NSL, you couldn't really make a living out of football, and even still, the Europe was where you wanted to be. If you wanted to be playing in the best leagues in the world, then eventually you had to make that move. So they were great with it. I mean, my brother-in-law, Martin, who you know very well, he jokes about it to this day because he says, when I was taking out their older daughter, I had to have her home by 10 p.m. I wasn't allowed to sleep over. I couldn't take her to certain places. Yep. And then you come along and you can take her to Belgium. You're not even married, So that the differences between us was... we laugh about. I think there's a bit of favoritism there.
All right. So we'll skip forward now because, like I said, you covered quite a lot of that. Gone to Brisbane, so you decided to come home. Better environment for you. All those are the reasons you mentioned. How long was that first deal that you signed?
With Queensland Roar, it was so again. It was I was touch and go again whether I'd come back or not. The A-League was gathering some real momentum, and there was a huge buzz around it. It was exciting, and I remember, I don't know if Queensland got in touch with me, or I know every other club, because back then you could only sign 20 players for each A-League club, and all the clubs had their teams already filled, their spots filled. Miron Bleiberg, who was the coach of Queensland Roar, he was leaving one spot open just for, to keep his options open, I guess, for someone that might pop up. And then, so I came back and eventually took that last spot. And I signed for 1 year. I guess, that was one of the pieces of advice my agent gave me. He just said, look, come back, sign for a year, get your career back on track, and then hopefully use that to get back over to Europe. But, so I signed for 1 year initially.
What was he like, Miron?
Miron was, look, he's a guy who, whether he's on TV, whether he's just chatting one-on-one to you or in front of a team, he's exactly the same. He's got one-liners all the time. He was a funny guy. He was always trying to be, wanted to be different, in the way that he did things. Some of our training sessions were hilarious in terms of doing drills. You have possession drills, which are quite normal, but you could only get a point if you nutmegged a player or if you did a back heel. So you can imagine how quick that goes to complete garbage with players just back heeling the ball all over the place. But he was, he kept things fun and interesting, and we had a good culture in that team. Again, a few of the AIS boys that I came through were in that squad. We were a very young team, and we had some fun that year. We didn't make the finals, unfortunately, but That's some fun.
Good year for you anyway with the Golden Boot. So you've come back to a brand new league. It was a lot of unknowns. You've had your season. You said you still had ambitions to hopefully springboard back overseas. So you've gone the Golden Boot. How did Sydney come about then? And was there an option to go back over?
Not really. So Sydney came about midway through the season, I'd say, with the Raw. They got in touch with my agent about coming down to Sydney, and look, Sydney and Melbourne were the two biggest clubs from the beginning. You could see, the two biggest cities and the two clubs that were stacked with local talent. Sydney had Dwight York. So when they called, they made an offer for 3 years for a 3-year deal, and there wasn't any offers from Europe. So I guess the idea was, I was happy with what I'd seen with the A-League. The crowds were great in that first year. The salaries that were going around were a lot better than back in the NSL. So you could now start to make a living from football here in Australia. I was still young. I thought, I'll sign this deal for 3 years and see where it takes me. I'm going to a club that's doing well. Like I said, at the time, it was halfway through the first season, but Sydney were doing well and clearly one of the better sides as well. So I thought, in joining that team, it's going to make me a better player, and who knows where it goes from there, But I was excited to be joining that team. They were coached by Alex Brosque as well, who I heard was an incredible coach. So I just thought that making that move to Sydney, coming back home as well, was definitely the right one, and was going to be one that would, definitely progress my career, whether it was to stay here or move overseas, whichever way it went. I just thought coming back to Sydney and joining that club would be the right move.
And it's funny that you did mention Juninho earlier, because I had this written down as a question I wanted to ask, because he obviously was here at the back end of his career and well known for his stint in the Premier League, especially with Middlesbrough. What was it that, and you said you'd maybe not had a telepathic connection, but he was that good that you could do whatever and he'd find you or whatever. So what was it that separated him from the other guys? Because there's a lot of marquees, especially at the start, who came here who didn't do well.
Yeah.
What separated him? Because he was a joy to watch, I'm sure, a pleasure to play with. What did you think separated him from some of the other marquees that might have come and not done well?
Well, I think, look, a lot of the players we've had out, and be it international marquees or even some of the former Socceroos that have come back, I think what people don't realise is that there is a difference between the A-League and the players here compared to your big clubs and better teams in Europe. So, I mean, the quality, there's definitely a difference. So the time that those players had on the ball in those leagues around the world, and the quality with which they were given passes and that understanding with teammates around the pitch as well, allowed them to be as great as they were, these guys. So coming to the A-League, where sometimes the passes aren't where they should be, or they're delayed, or the pitches are slow, so you're getting the ball and you've got a player on you immediately. I think for some players, they found it harder, right? Because the level isn't as good. And I think as fans, we're always expecting here that, they've played in the Premier League, they're going to come here and dribble everybody and score or create something. But it's not that simple. You're in a team with 10 other guys on the field where you're sometimes only as good as the quality around you, right? So he was one of those players where he was small. There was not much of him physically. So you knew there had to be a brilliance about him that not many players have. And you look around the league at the guys who've always had that, your Diego Castros, your Ninkovic's, guys who aren't physically that big and strong and powerful, but just have the intelligence that not many have, and they know how to make space and create space regardless of what's around them, of how to get that time on the ball and then play the pass that they need to play. And he was one of those guys. He just knew where to drift, where to be, and would have been frustrating for him, like I said, because he's playing with guys who don't always give him the ball that he needs and get him time on the ball that he needs. But he knew how to find it, how to get it. And like I said, when being Brazilian, he spoke Spanish as well, so that connection I had with him and spoke to him a lot. And he was just one of those guys where, you just had to run into space. You had to get off your defender and find and make a run. And it didn't matter how. He's probably one of only two guys that I played with that were so good at that. I feel like that was one of the strengths of my game. Getting into space and making certain runs, and getting into players where defenders didn't want me to go. But he was one who could just find you. He could put the ball, and a guy that I played with in the UAE, Omar Abdurrahman, who had the big upper hair.
Yeah.
He was another one. He played sort of on that right wing, and I just knew anywhere that I'd run, anywhere in the box, any run with a bit of space, and they would, with any part of their foot, left foot, right foot, they'd get it to where it needed to be with a perfect weight. And it was incredible. I mean, playing with someone like that behind you as a striker, nothing better.
And you did mention earlier, you had some great friendly games with Sydney, Liverpool, Chelsea. I think West Ham was another one as well. One I want to touch on, though, is LA Galaxy.
Yeah.
David Beckham came out and you scored 2 goals, and neither of those goals made the David Beckham documentary. Have you had a word with him about that? Or
yeah, I was a bit upset. I did send him on Instagram something, just a video of those 2 goals. So, mate, forgot about these, I think.
Maybe they'll read it in, sure. Do you know who got his jersey that game?
Yeah, I think it was, if not, I'm pretty sure it was Mark Rudin.
Yeah.
Have you looked into it?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm asking you.
I remember seeing, because Rudes, I'm pretty sure was captain. I do remember seeing a photo where the 2 of them are standing side by side at the end of the pitch, when the game had finished, and they had swapped jerseys. I'm pretty sure it was Rudes.
Okay, and Beck's obviously, I think you guys won 5-3, 5-2, something like that.
5-2.
Beck scored a trademark free kick.
He did.
Was that planned? Because that foul was pretty ordinary.
It was.
Yeah?
As in the foul was ordinary for him to put a top corner. That's,
I was like,
I think so. Look, yeah, no. So it wasn't planned to foul. I think it was more planned from the referee's point of view. Listen, anyone goes down anywhere near the box, just give it, because Clint Bolton came in at halftime and he just gave everybody a spray, because we went in thinking, how good is that, right? Yeah. Yes, we're winning. Who cares? At the end of the day, there's 80,000 people here. We'd never played in anything like it, but everyone's here to see him. We're here to see him, right? Yeah. So, yes, we're winning. We're beating LA Galaxy. We're beating David Beckham, but we all want to see his quality. And just before halftime, he puts that top corner. So we've all gone into the sheds absolutely buzzing, laughing about how good it was and how good the moment was. And Bolton has just given us a spray. So that's why we'll never win anything here. You're happy for someone to score. We've just conceded a goal. We're like, mate, it's David Beckham. He's put one top corner. Just let it be. That image will enjoy it, even though you conceded, mate. Who cares, Yeah. But no, it was funny. Butzer was, like I said, keepers are strange blokes. They never like conceding, whether it's in training or in front of 80,000 people with David Beckham putting one past you. But no, it was a crazy moment.
Yeah. So just with that first stint with Sydney, a bunch of goals. You were top assist as well for one of the seasons or 2 of the seasons there. You did the double 09-10.
Mm-hmm.
Recall to the Socceroos after 4 years away. Is there anything we could go through that whole season, be here for 4 hours, those 4 seasons or whatever it was? Is there anything you would like to pinpoint, any memories from that first sort of stint back that really stand out?
Look, it was a difficult period in the club history, given, what they did in the first year. So look, I think even just my early struggles, in coming to a team that was stacked with so many good Australian players, Dwight York, who ended up leaving when I came, Pierre Brosque left when I came as well. So a lot changed in that second season, and it wasn't a good season for the club, and it was a couple difficult seasons that we had. Even myself personally, I didn't start all that well. It took me about, I think it was, funnily enough, my 14th game where I scored a goal for Sydney. So I didn't start, my stint there all that well. It was difficult. But yeah, the second season a lot better. I hit the ground running from the beginning in that year, but again, we brought in. It wasn't until we started to bring in, players like Colosimo, Johnny Aloisi, these guys that sort of Sydney started to feel like a big club again, and we went on to win the double, like you said, in 09, 2010. So we had a couple difficult periods and years leading into that. So that whole, while the 9-10 season sticks out as having won, for me, my first championship was special. It was sort of the journey for Sydney getting back there. I came to a club who was Bling FC and was expected to win it, and we sort of went downhill for a number of years, prior to that. So that whole stint was enjoyable.
There you have it, football fans. First part of our chat with former Socceroo and Sydney FC legend Alex Brosque is done. Make sure you follow us on YouTube and Spotify so you don't miss out on anything coming up, and also give us a like and follow on Instagram as well. That is part A, the home leg of our chat Alex Brosque done. So please make sure you tune in for part B, the away leg, when that drops very shortly. Thanks as always for choosing to score some goals with us. And as always, please celebrate with the corner flag.